You can't just leave them here to die, Handyman Gregory Turner shouted, his voice echoing in the convent hallway as Father Dunovan raised a pistol. A single gunshot rang out, followed by the scrape of a trowel sealing the final stone. Inside the wall, 5 nuns were plunged into a darkness that would last 6 years. That darkness was broken by a sledgehammer. A demolition crew, tasked with renovating the abandoned convent, smashed through a false wall to find a hidden tomb. Inside sat 5 skeletons in their tattered habits, arranged in a perfect circle. They weren't missing. They had been entombed. But the real twist lay in the journal clutched in a skeletal hand. The gunshot the sisters heard wasn't for them. It was for the handyman who tried to save them. The case wasn't about finding the nuns' killers. It was about finding the killer's first victim, the man who built their tomb and then silenced for his crisis of conscience. Welcome back to Last Seen Stories, where we uncovered the truth behind mysterious disappearances that shook communities to their core. Before we dive deeper into today's disturbing case, I want to thank you for joining me. If this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button and notification bell so you never miss a story that needs to be told. Today's investigation takes us into a particularly dark corner of human cruelty, one that might be difficult for some viewers. If you've ever discovered something that completely changed your understanding of a place or person you thought you knew, share your experience in the comments below. Your stories remind us that truth can hide in plain sight, sometimes behind walls we never thought to question. Now, let's return to Blackwater Ridge, Montana, and the day that would finally bring answers to a 6-year-old mystery that had nearly been forgotten.
The morning sunlight filtered through the stained glass windows of Sacred Heart Catholic Church, casting kaleidoscopic patterns across the polished wooden pews. Detective Nora Quinn sat in the last row, watching as Father Peter Callahan led the small congregation in prayer. His voice echoed solemnly through the quiet church. "Today we gather to remember our sisters in Christ," Father Callahan intoned, "who left this earthly world 6 years ago today. We pray for Sisters Regina, Agnes, Verity, Catherine, and Lucia, that they may have found the peace that so eluded us in understanding their departure." Nora shifted uncomfortably at the word departure, such a gentle euphemism for what remained one of the most baffling disappearances in Blackwater Ridge's history. The official report suggested the 5 nuns had chosen to leave, abandoning their vows in the convent without warning. Nora had never believed that explanation, not for a moment. The memorial service was sparsely attended, just a dozen or so parishioners scattered throughout the church, their heads bowed in respectful silence. Blackwater Ridge had always been small, barely 3,000 souls nestled in the mountains where winter lasted 7 months and everyone knew everyone else's business. Or thought they did, anyway. After the final blessing, Nora remained seated as the others filed out. Through the open doors, she could see the snow-covered peaks in the distance, a reminder of how isolated St. Veronica's convent had been. Perfect for spiritual contemplation or for vanishing without witnesses. "Detective Quinn," Father Callahan approached, his hands clasped before him. "I didn't expect to see you here today." Nora stood, smoothing down her dark wool coat. "I come every year, Father." "Of course," he nodded, his eyes reflecting a gentle sympathy. "Your aunt was close with Mother Superior Regina, wasn't she? They grew up together in Helena. Aunt Beatrice never accepted that Regina would just leave, not without saying goodbye." Father Callahan sighed. "Faith gives us strength even when answers elude us." Nora bit back a more cynical response. Faith hadn't given her any answers in the 6 years since the sisters had vanished. Good old-fashioned detective work hadn't yielded much either, but at least it was something tangible. "You worked the case from the beginning, if I recall." I did. My first major assignment after being promoted to detective." She didn't add that many considered it the reason she hadn't been promoted since. Obsession didn't look good on performance reviews. "And you never believed they left voluntarily?" Nora shook her head. 5 women, ages 26 to 64, don't just walk away from their lives without taking any personal item, not even a toothbrush. Mother Superior Regina needed medication for her heart condition. That was left behind too. Father Callahan nodded thoughtfully. "I came to Blackwater Ridge 3 years after they disappeared. The parish was still shaken by it all." "The whole town was," Nora said. She glanced around the empty church. "Fewer people remember them each year." "Such is the way of the world," Father Callahan said softly. "But God remembers." Nora's response was cut short by the vibration of her phone. She pulled it from her pocket with an apologetic glance to the priest and checked the screen. "Quinn?" she answered, stepping away slightly. "Detective, it's Malone." The dispatcher's voice was tight with urgency. "You need to get to St. Veronica's right away." Nora felt her pulse quicken. "What's happened?" "The demolition crew working on the conversion project, they found something inside the walls. Chief Barnes specifically asked for you." "I'm on my way," Nora said, already moving towards the door. She turned briefly to Father Callahan. "I have to go." The priest looked at her with an expression of concern. "Is everything all right?" I don't know," Nora replied honestly, "but I'm about to find out." As she hurried to her car, snow crunching beneath her boots, Nora couldn't help but feel that the timing was more than coincidental. 6 years to the day since the sisters had vanished, and now something found inside the walls of the very place they had disappeared from. The hair on the back of her neck stood on end as she started the engine, her breath forming small clouds in the frigid Montana air. Whatever waited for her at St. Veronica's, Nora knew with sudden, chilling certainty that today would finally bring answers to the questions that had haunted her for 6 long years.
Nora's truck climbed steadily up the mountain road leading to St. Veronica's Convent. The vehicle's heater struggled against the February chill as heavy gray clouds threatened more snow before nightfall. The convent was located 5 miles outside town, its isolation originally intended for spiritual retreat, but now feeling ominous in her mind. As she drove, memories of the original investigation flooded back. She had been 32 then, eager to prove herself in the small department where female detectives were still a rarity. The case had consumed her from the moment Sheriff Patterson had assigned it to her. 5 women gone without a trace. Mother Superior Regina Phillips, 64, had led the convent for nearly 2 decades with quiet authority and practical wisdom. Sister Agnes Peyton, 59, served as the convent's caretaker and gardener, known for the vegetables she grew even in Montana's harsh climate. Sister Verity Michaels, 42, managed the convent's modest finances and taught math at the parish school 3 days a week. Sister Catherine Blackwood, 38, was the convent's resident artist, her religious paintings and sculptures sought after by churches throughout the state. And the youngest, Sister Lucia Navarro, 26, who had taken her final vows just 6 months before disappearing, served as the convent's connection to the surrounding community, organizing charity drives and outreach programs. The convent itself was a sturdy stone structure built in 1912, 3 stories of austere architecture surrounded by pine forest. The sisters followed a structured daily routine: prayer at 5 a.m., breakfast at 6:30, work duties until noon, prayer again, afternoon duties, evening prayer, dinner and reflection before retiring at 9 p.m. Their lives were predictable, disciplined, and, according to everyone who knew them, deeply fulfilling.
until February 17, 2003, when Father Donovan, arriving to lead morning mass, found the convent empty. The sisters' breakfast dishes were still on the table, food half eaten. Their beds were made, their few possessions undisturbed. Their single shared vehicle remained parked in its usual spot. No signs of forced entry, no signs of struggle. They had simply vanished. The investigation had been thorough, but ultimately fruitless. Search parties combed the surrounding forests for weeks. Interviews with everyone in town who had contact with the sisters revealed nothing unusual. Nora had constructed elaborate timelines, conducted background checks, explored every theory from voluntary departure to foul play. "Where did you go?" Nora murmured to herself as the convent came into view around the final bend. The once serene building was now surrounded by construction equipment and temporary fencing. After the diocese could no longer justify maintaining the empty property, it had been sold to a developer who planned to convert it into luxury mountain retreats for wealthy vacationers seeking spiritual aesthetics without spiritual commitment. Nora had vehemently opposed the sale and conversion, arguing that it was still an active crime scene. But after 5 years with no leads, her objections had been overruled. The case wasn't officially closed, but it had grown colder than a Montana January. As she parked beside several police cruisers and the coroner's van, a sick feeling settled in her stomach. The presence of the coroner could only mean one thing. Chief Barnes stood near the entrance, deep in conversation with the county medical examiner. When he spotted Nora, he broke away and approached her, his weathered face grave. "Quinn," he greeted her. "Figured you'd want to be here for this." "What did they find?" Nora asked, although she already knew it wouldn't be good news. Barnes glanced back at the building. "You'd better see for yourself." As they walked toward the convent entrance, Barnes filled her in on the basics. Construction crew was scheduled to begin major demolition today. Foreman is a guy named Darren Marshall. When his crew started taking down what they thought was a non-loading bearing wall on the second floor, they found something that definitely wasn't in the blueprints. Inside, the convent's formerly austere interior was now dusty and partially gutted. Wiring hung exposed from ceiling fixtures, and the wooden floors were covered in protective sheets. Barnes led her up the wide staircase to the second floor, where a cluster of people had gathered at the end of the long hallway. The north wing contained the sisters' private quarters, Nora recalled aloud. 5 small cells and a shared bathroom. Barnes nodded. The renovation plans called for combining those spaces into 2 larger bedroom suites. As they approached, the group parted to reveal a man in his 40s wearing a hard hat and a shell-shocked expression. His construction clothes were dust-covered and his face was ashen. "This is Darren Marshall," he introduced, "the foreman I mentioned." Nora extended her hand. "Detective Quinn, I understand you made quite a discovery today." Marshall nodded, his eyes haunted. "Never seen anything like it. Never want to again." "Can you walk me through what happened?" Nora asked. "We were prepping the wall for demolition," Marshall explained, pointing to what appeared to be a solid wall at the end of the corridor. "According to the blueprints, there should just be exterior stone behind this plaster wall. But when Tony took the first swing with the sledgehammer, it sounded wrong, hollow." Now Nora could see that a rough opening had been made in the wall, approximately 3 feet wide. Beyond it was darkness. "We shined a light inside," Marshall continued. "That's when we saw them." "I need to see," Nora said to Barnes. The chief handed her a flashlight. "Forensics has documented the scene, that we haven't disturbed anything yet. Wanted to wait for you." Nora approached the opening in the wall, switched on the flashlight, and peered inside. The beam illuminated a space approximately 15 feet square. What she saw made her breath catch in her throat. 5 decomposed bodies arranged in a circle, facing inward, each skeleton still partially clothed in a tattered remnant of a black habit. At the center of the circle, a makeshift altar constructed from what appeared to be a small table. On it, a crucifix and 5 prayer books meticulously arranged. But what drew Nora's attention most was the object clutched in the skeletal fingers of the smallest figure, a book. Not a prayer book like the others, but what appeared to be a journal. Nora stepped back, her mind racing to process what she was seeing. "They were taken," she whispered. "They were sealed in."
The room behind the false wall fell into immediate, reverent silence as Nora's words hung in the air. The harsh reality of what they were witnessing settled over everyone present. These women hadn't vanished. They had been imprisoned and left to die, forgotten behind a wall that shouldn't have existed. "I need better light in there," Nora said, her detective's training taking over despite the shock. "And I want Dr. Levine to document everything before we disturb the scene." Dr. Abigail Levine, the county medical examiner, stepped forward. She was a petite woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a practical bun. "We've set up portable lights. I was waiting for your arrival before proceeding further." Darren Marshall, the construction foreman, stood back, visibly shaken. "We've halted all work, of course. My crew is pretty rattled finding something like this." "You did the right thing calling it in immediately," Nora assured him. "I'll need statements from everyone who was present when the wall was breached." As the forensics team carefully set up additional lighting, the hidden chamber was gradually illuminated in stark detail. The space had once been a storage closet at the end of the hallway, Nora realized. According to the original blueprints she'd studied years ago, it should have had a door opening into the corridor. That entrance had been sealed with such skill that it had become invisible, indistinguishable from the surrounding wall. With better lighting, the gruesome tableau became clearer. The 5 skeletons sat in a perfect circle, legs crossed in meditation postures. Their habits, though degraded by time, had maintained enough structural integrity to identify them clearly as the garments worn by the Sisters of St. Veronica's order. Between the remains lay personal items, a pair of reading glasses, a small wooden rosary, a silver cross on a chain, a carved wooden bird, and a small icon of the Virgin Mary. Dr. Levine carefully entered the space, moving with practiced precision to avoid disturbing evidence. "The floor around them is covered in writing," she observed, pointing her gloved finger at the wooden planks. Nora leaned closer to the opening. Indeed, the floorboards within the circle formed by the remains were covered with tiny, cramped handwriting, appearing to have been carved with some sharp implement, then filled in with what might have been ink or blood. "We'll need to document all of that text," Nora said. "Every word." At the center of the circle, the makeshift altar told its own story. A small table that Nora recognized from the Mother Superior's office had been repurposed. Upon it sat 5 prayer books, arranged in a fan pattern. The crucifix at the center was bent slightly, as if it had been removed from somewhere else and reattached to this new base. But most compelling was the journal clutched in the skeletal hand of what Nora instinctively knew must be Sister Lucia, the youngest nun. Even from the opening in the wall, Nora could see that its pages were filled with the same cramped handwriting that covered the floor. "Those remains," Nora said quietly to Dr. Levine, "the smallest one with the journal, I believe that's Sister Lucia Navarro." Dr. Levine nodded. Based on the skeletal structure and size, that would be consistent with a female in her mid-20s. She moved carefully around the perimeter of the room, examining each set of remains without touching them. "Preliminary observation suggests these individuals died of dehydration and starvation. There are no obvious signs of traumatic injury." The implications were horrific. These women hadn't been killed quickly. They had been left to die slowly, trapped in a space barely large enough to sit in a circle. There would have been no ventilation, Dr. Levine continued, examining the sealed room. No light source except what they created by themselves. We've found the remains of approximately 30 candles, all completely burned down. "How long?"
Nora asked, the question catching in her throat. Dr. Levine understood what she was asking. Without water, 3 to 4 days. With minimal water but no food, perhaps 2 to 3 weeks. We'll know more once we analyze the journal and any other writings. As the forensics team continued their meticulous documentation, photographing every angle of the scene, Nora tried to process what she was seeing. For 6 years, she had imagined countless scenarios: kidnapping, voluntary departure, even murder, but nothing as cruelly calculated as this. Chief Barnes approached, his face grim. The press is already gathering outside. Word travels fast in Blackwater Ridge. Keep them at a distance, Nora instructed. These women deserve dignity in death, and I don't want details leaking before we understand what happened here. Agreed, Barnes nodded. I've called in additional officers to secure the perimeter. He hesitated, then added, There's something else you should see. In the corner of the room, behind the skeleton we think is Mother Superior. Nora carefully maneuvered to get a better view of the area Barnes had indicated. There, scratched into the wall itself, was a single name: Victor. Father Victor Donovan, Nora breathed, the parish priest who discovered the missing. The same, Barnes confirmed. Retired 5 years ago and moved to Arizona, according to diocesan records. Find him, Nora said, her voice hardening. Now. As Barnes stepped away to make the necessary calls, Dr. Levine carefully approached the remains holding the journal. Detective Quinn, I believe we can safely retrieve this without compromising the rest of the scene. The information it contains could be crucial. Nora nodded. Proceed with caution. With painstaking care, Dr. Levine documented the journal's position, then gently freed it from the skeletal fingers that had held it for 6 years. The leather cover was cracked and discolored, but intact. Dr. Levine placed it in an evidence bag and handed it to Nora. I'll continue the preliminary examination, but it will take time to properly process this scene. Nora took the bagged journal, feeling its weight in her hands. These women were forgotten once. I won't let it happen again. As she turned to leave the chamber, her flashlight beam caught something glinting near the wall. A small key on a silver chain around what would have been Mother Superior Regina's neck. Nora pointed it out to Dr. Levine, who nodded and made a note of it.
Outside in the hallway, Nora took a deep breath, trying to center herself. The journal in her hands might finally provide the answers she had sought for 6 years. But one thing was already clear. The Sisters of St. Veronica's hadn't disappeared. They had been imprisoned, sealed away to die in darkness, and someone had built that wall. The convent grounds had transformed into a full crime scene by late afternoon. Yellow police tape cordoned off the perimeter, while forensic technicians moved methodically through the building. The media presence had grown, cameras and reporters kept at bay by uniformed officers at the property line. Nora had claimed a small room on the first floor, once the convent's parlor, as a temporary command center. She sat at a folding table, the sealed evidence bag containing Sister Lucia's journal before her. Dr. Levine had given preliminary approval for Nora to examine the contents, provided she wore gloves and documented everything. As she carefully opened the journal, the fragile pages crackled with age and exposure. The handwriting inside was small and precise, economizing on space, a habit likely formed from rationing paper. The entries began on February 17th, 2003. He came for us before dawn. Mother Superior tried to reason with him, but his anger was terrible to behold. We are sealed in now. May God forgive him, for I do not know if we can." Nora looked up from the page, a chill running through her. The entry confirmed what the physical evidence suggested. This was no accident, no case of women who had somehow become trapped. Someone had deliberately imprisoned them. A knock on the door interrupted her reading. Chief Barnes entered, accompanied by a tall man with a stern expression whom Nora didn't recognize. "Detective Quinn," Chief Barnes said, his tone formal. "This is Sheriff Anton Reeves. He's recently taken over jurisdiction for this part of the county due to the redistricting last year." Nora stood, extending her hand. "Sheriff, I wasn't aware the county had reassigned jurisdiction for Blackwater Ridge." "Recent development," Reeves said, his handshake firm but brief. "I understand you were the lead detective on the original missing persons case." "That's correct," Nora confirmed, immediately sensing tension in his demeanor. Reeves glanced at the journal on the table. "Chief Barnes has brought me up to speed on the discovery. As this is now officially a homicide investigation within county jurisdiction, my department will be taking the lead." Nora felt a flare of protective indignation. "With all due respect, Sheriff, I've been working this case for 6 years. I have intimate knowledge of the sisters, the convent, and the community that no one else possesses." "Your dedication is noted, Detective. You're welcome to consult, but this investigation will be conducted by my department." Before Nora could respond, Barnes interjected. "Sheriff Reeves, Detective Quinn is our most qualified investigator. Her history with this case is invaluable. I'd like to propose a joint investigation. Your authority, our expertise." Reeves considered this for a moment, his expression calculating. "Fine, but I want to be clear. This is my investigation. All evidence, all interviews, all findings go through me first." "Understood," Barnes said before Nora could object. As Reeves moved toward the table to examine the journal, Nora stepped slightly in front of him. "The journal is extremely fragile. Dr. Levine has only cleared it for limited handling at this point." Reeves narrowed his eyes but nodded. "What have you learned so far?" Nora summarized the first entry she had read. It confirms they were deliberately sealed inside by someone they knew, a man. Sister Lucia doesn't name him in this entry, but the name Victor scratched into the wall strongly suggests Father Donovan's involvement. "That's circumstantial at best. Any progress locating Father Donovan?" Barnes nodded. "He's still in Arizona. Local police have been dispatched to his residence. We should have contact within the hour." "Good," Reeves said. "What else do we know about the scene?" Dr. Levine entered the room, her scrubs now covered with a clean lab coat. She announced, "I've completed my preliminary examination." Reeves introduced himself. "Based on the condition of the remains and the environmental factors in that sealed space, I estimate they survived approximately 3 weeks after being imprisoned. Cause of death appears to be dehydration and starvation." Nora repeated the 3 weeks, the horror of it sinking in. "They were alive behind that wall for 3 weeks while we were searching the forest and questioning people in town. The room contained a small supply of water, an approximately 2-gallon jug that was empty when we found it. No food provisions were evident." "What about the wall itself? How was it constructed?" "The false wall was professionally built, not a hasty job. It was plastered and painted to match the existing walls exactly. Most telling, the construction included soundproofing materials, layers of insulation that would have muffled any cries for help." "This was planned," Nora concluded, "meticulously." Sheriff Reeves paced the small room. Who would have had the expertise to construct such a wall, and how did they do it without anyone noticing? The convent was isolated, the nearest neighbor was 3 miles away. As for the expertise, she paused. A memory surfaced. Gregory Turner. He was the handyman who did regular maintenance at the convent. He had construction experience. Was he investigated during the original case? Of course, Reese said, although that doesn't mean he wasn't involved before or after the actual disappearance. Nora had to acknowledge the validity of his observation. I'll pull his file from the original investigation.
As they discussed next steps, a young officer appeared at the door. Chief Barnes, we've got Father Callahan from Sacred Heart Church asking to speak with Detective Quinn. Says it's urgent. Barnes looked to Nora, who nodded. Send him in. Father Callahan entered, removing his hat, his face pale with shock. Detective Quinn, I came as soon as I heard. Is it true? They found the sisters? It's true, Father, Nora confirmed gently. They were sealed inside a hidden room here at the convent. They've been here all along. The priest crossed himself, visibly shaken. Dear Lord, how is this possible? Who would do such a thing? That's what we're determining, Sheriff Reeves interjected. Sheriff Anton Reeves, County Department. Did you know Father Victor Donovan well, Father Callahan? The question seemed to catch the priest off guard. I never met him personally. He was gone before I arrived in Blackwater Ridge. But I've heard stories, of course. What kind of stories? Nora pressed. Father Callahan hesitated. Nothing specific to suggest he could be capable of this, just that he was strict, traditional. Some found him difficult. Others respected his unwavering commitment to church doctrine. Nora made a mental note to review everything they had on Father Donovan from the original investigation. She had interviewed him multiple times, and while he had seemed genuinely distraught about the sisters' disappearance, something about his demeanor had always struck her as performed rather than authentic. Father Callahan, she said, were you aware of any conflicts between Father Donovan and the sisters, particularly Mother Superior Regina? The priest shook his head. As I said, I arrived after all this happened. But he paused, considering something. There were some financial records I found confusing when I took over the parish, inconsistencies in the accounts. I assumed it was just poor bookkeeping. What kind of inconsistencies? Reeves asked sharply. Funds allocated for convent maintenance that didn't match any actual repairs, donations earmarked for specific projects that never materialized. I raised my concerns with the diocese, but they suggested I focus on moving forward rather than investigating the past. Nora and Reeves exchanged significant glances. We'll need copies of those records, Nora said. Of course, Father Callahan agreed. Anything I can do to help. As the priest left to retrieve the financial documents, Nora turned back to the journal on the table. The sisters had written their story, preserved it in their final days. Now it was her responsibility to ensure their voices were finally heard. I need to continue reading this journal, she told Reeves. Whatever happened here, Sister Lucia documented it. These women knew who trapped them and why. Their testimony is in these pages. For the first time, Reeves's stern expression softened slightly. Proceed, Detective. I'll coordinate with the forensics team and Dr. Levine. As he left the room, Nora carefully turned to the next entry in Sister Lucia's journal, steeling herself for the horrors that awaited within its pages. By evening, the investigation had established a command center in the Blackwater Ridge Police Station. Autopsy transportation had been delayed until morning due to an approaching snowstorm, so the crime scene remained under constant guard at the convent. Nora had insisted on bringing the journal back to the station, where it could be properly documented and preserved. The conference room walls were now covered with photos, timelines, and profiles of everyone connected to St. Veronica Convent. At the center were three primary persons of interest: Father Victor Donovan, Gregory Turner, and Bishop Thomas Kaplan. Sheriff Reeves studied the display with his arms crossed. What do we know about each of them? Nora pointed at Father Donovan's photograph. Victor Donovan, 67 years old now, served as parish priest at Sacred Heart from 1995 to 2004. He was the one who reported the sisters missing, claiming he arrived from morning mass and found the convent empty. No prior criminal history, retired to Sedona, Arizona, where he lives in a diocesan retirement community. Any contact yet? Local police made contact an hour ago. They're keeping him under observation until our team arrives tomorrow, Chief Barnes reported. Nora moved to the next photo. Gregory Turner, 54, local handyman who did regular maintenance at the convent for nearly a decade before the disappearance. He had access to all areas of the building and the skills to construct the false wall. However, he had a verified alibi for the day of the disappearance. He was in Missoula with his brother. That doesn't rule him out as an accomplice, Reeves noted. The wall could have been prepared in advance. I agree, Nora said. I've dispatched officers to locate him. He still lives just outside Blackwater Ridge. Finally, she indicated the third photo. Bishop Thomas Kaplan, 72. He oversaw this diocese at the time of the disappearance and made the decision to close the convent and eventually sell the property. He's now in Helena. What's his connection? Reeves asked skeptically. Father Callahan delivered the financial records as promised. Nora took up a folder from the table. They show significant financial irregularities during Father Donovan's tenure. Large sums allocated for convent maintenance that don't correspond to any actual work. Most interestingly, Bishop Kaplan signed off on all these expenditures without requiring documentation. Barnes whistled softly. You think they were embezzling church funds? It's a theory worth investigating, Nora replied, and potentially a motive. If the sisters discovered financial improprieties, that's a long way from embezzlement to walling 5 women into a room to die, Reeves pointed out. True, Nora acknowledged, but people have killed for far less money than what appears to have disappeared from these accounts. Reeves nodded thoughtfully. What about the journal? How much have you been able to review?
Nora picked up her notes. I've documented the first week of entries. They're difficult reading. She steadied herself before continuing. According to Sister Lucia, the sisters had discovered financial discrepancies in the convent accounts. Sister Verity, who managed their finances, noticed that funds purportedly spent on repairs and maintenance didn't match the actual work completed. They confronted Father Donovan? Barnes asked. Not immediately, Nora said. First, they took their concerns to Bishop Kaplan during his pastoral visit in early February 2003. According to Lucia's account, the bishop dismissed their concerns and instructed them to trust in Father Donovan's management of parish resources. So they went to Donovan next? Reeves surmised. Nora nodded. On February 16th, the day before they disappeared, Mother Superior Regina requested a private meeting with him after Sunday Mass. Sister Lucia doesn't detail what was said, but she writes that Mother Superior returned deeply troubled and gathered the sisters to pray for clarity in a time of moral darkness. And the next morning, Donovan arrived before dawn and sealed them in, Barnes concluded grimly. That's what the journal suggests, Nora confirmed, though it doesn't explain how he managed to construct the wall so quickly, or how he prevented them from escaping during construction. A junior officer entered the conference room, looking slightly hesitant. Detective Quinn, we've located Gregory Turner. He's at his cabin about 7 miles outside town. Officers are maintaining surveillance, but he appears to be just going about his normal evening routine. Good work. Let's bring him in first thing tomorrow. I want to question him myself. As the officer departed, Reeves turned to Nora. We should also interview anyone still in town who had regular contact with the sisters before they disappeared. Someone might remember something relevant now that we know what actually happened. I've already compiled a list, Nora said, handing him a document. Most are still local, the owner of the general store where they bought supplies, the pharmacist who filled Mother Superior's prescriptions, several parishioners who worked closely with them on charity projects. Reeves looked impressed despite himself. Thorough. I've had 6 years to think about this case, Nora said simply. As they continued reviewing the evidence, another officer arrived with a manila envelope. Detective Quinn, we have a question from a suggestion from the Helena Dioscal Archives, the property records you requested for St. Veronica's Convent. Nora thanked him and emptied the contents onto the table. Property deeds, renovation permits, and finally, The sale documentation when the diocese had sold the property to the current developers. "Look at this," she said, pointing to the sale price. "The property sold for nearly twice its appraised value." Barnes frowned. "In this market? That's unusual." "Especially for a property with a troubled history," Nora agreed. "Who authorized the sale?" She flipped through the documents until she found the final authorization. Bishop Kaplan, of course. But look who brokered the deal. Meridian Holdings, LLC. She quickly searched the name on her laptop. Meridian Holdings, LLC is a shell company, and its registration address is in Sedona, Arizona. Reeves leaned forward, suddenly alert. The same city where Father Donovan retired. "This is circumstantial, but compelling," Nora said, the pieces beginning to align in her mind. Father Donovan and Bishop Kaplan potentially embezzling church funds. The sisters discover the discrepancies. They're sealed away to silence them. Years later, the property is sold at an inflated price, with proceeds potentially flowing through a shell company connected to Donovan. "We need to get Donovan back here for questioning immediately, and I want a warrant to examine his financial records as well as Bishop Kaplan's." As they continued working into the night, Nora's phone rang. Dr. Levine's name appeared on the screen. "Dr. Levine," Nora said, "do you have updates?" "Detective Quinn, I'm still at the convent scene. The structural engineers made an additional discovery when examining the false wall. There's something embedded inside it, a small metal box. We're extracting it carefully now, but I thought you should know immediately." "I'm on my way," Nora said, already grabbing her coat. As she and Reeves drove back to the convent, through the beginning flurries of the approaching snowstorm, Nora couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was sealed inside that wall, alongside the sisters, might be the key to understanding not just how they died, but why someone had condemned them to such a terrible fate.
Morning broke with heavy snowfall blanketing Blackwater Ridge. Nora had barely slept, spending most of the night at the station reviewing evidence. The metal box discovered inside the false wall had contained church financial records, original documents that appeared to have been hidden by one of the sisters before they were sealed in. Now, with fresh coffee in hand, Nora sat with Dr. Patricia Weston, a religious scholar from the State University, who had been called in to help interpret some of the more esoteric references in Sister Lucia's journal. These entries become increasingly spiritual as their situation grew more desperate, Dr. Weston observed, carefully turning a page in the journal. The early accounts are quite straightforward, documenting their discovery of financial discrepancies, their confrontation with Father Donovan, and their imprisonment. Nora nodded. "I've reviewed those sections. It's the later entries I'm struggling with. They become more allegorical, filled with religious references. That's not uncommon in situations of extreme duress. Faith often becomes more pronounced, and religious language more symbolic." She pointed to an entry from what appeared to be about 2 weeks into their imprisonment. Here, Sister Lucia writes, "The guardian with keys to both kingdom and prison visits in dreams, his face both comforting and terrifying." "What does that mean?" Nora asked. "It's a reference to St. Peter," Dr. Weston explained, "often depicted holding the keys to heaven. But the prison reference is interesting, suggesting someone who presents himself as holy but has imprisoned them." "Father Donovan," Nora concluded. "Very likely," Dr. Weston agreed. "The journal suggests they could hear him sometimes on the other side of the wall. Listen to this entry. Today he came again. We could hear him moving in the corridor, speaking softly as if in prayer. Mother Superior called out to him, begging for mercy, if not for her, then for the younger sisters. There was only silence in response, then the sound of retreating footsteps. Nora felt a chill. He visited them, knowing they were dying in there? It appears so, Dr. Weston confirmed grimly. The most revealing passages come near the end when Sister Lucia seems to realize they won't be rescued. She carefully turned to entries from what appeared to be their final days. "Maybe 19, I think. Our water is nearly gone.
Sister Agnes passed into God's embrace this morning. Mother Superior led us in prayers for her soul. Sister Merity is very weak now. I don't know how much longer any of us will last. I write these words so that someday someone might know the truth of what happened to us. We discovered what Father Donovan and Bishop Kaplan have been doing with the church's money. For years, they have been diverting funds meant for charity, for repairs, for the good work of the church. Sister Verity found the discrepancies, donations that never reached their intended recipients, invoices for work never performed, accounts in offshore banks. When Mother Superior confronted Father Donovan, he was enraged. He came before dawn the next day with Gregory Turner. They forced us into the storage room at gunpoint, while Turner sealed us in. We could hear them arguing outside the wall. Turner hadn't realized what Donovan intended. He thought they were just locking us away temporarily until arrangements could be made to send us away to different convents. When Turner realized Donovan meant to leave us here to die, we heard them fighting, then a gunshot, then silence for hours. When Donovan returned, he was alone. We fear for what may have happened to Turner. May God forgive them both, as I struggled to do in these final hours. Nora looked up from the journal, her expression grim. This changes everything. Turner wasn't an accomplice. He was likely another victim. Dr. Weston nodded solemnly. The final entries suggest the sisters spent their last days in prayer, accepting their fate with remarkable grace. Sister Lucia's last entry is particularly moving. She turned to the final page where the handwriting had grown shaky and faint. I don't know what day it is now. Mother Superior and Sister Verity have gone to God. Sister Catherine is barely conscious. I alone remain able to write. Our water is gone. The candles will soon follow. I am not afraid of death, only of being forgotten. If anyone finds this journal, know that we died faithful to our vows and to the truth. We forgive Father Donovan, though we pray justice will be done. The evidence of his crimes is hidden where he would never look, beneath the Virgin's feet in the garden grotto. Sister Verity placed it there before we were sealed away. I hear Sister Catherine's breathing growing fainter now. Soon I will be alone with only these words as company. May whoever finds us pray for our souls, as we have prayed for the soul of our tormentor. Into your hands, O Lord, I commend my spirit, Dr. Weston translated softly. Nora sat in silence for a moment, absorbing the weight of Sister Lucia's final testimony. Then she reached for her phone. Sheriff Reeves, we need to check the garden grotto immediately, specifically beneath the statue of the Virgin Mary, and I need to know if Gregory Turner's disappearance was ever reported. She listened briefly, then continued. Also, I've finished reviewing the journal with Dr. Weston. We have confirmation that Father Donovan and Bishop Kaplan were embezzling church funds and that Donovan forced the sisters into that room at gunpoint. Turner helped seal the wall but apparently objected when he realized Donovan's true intentions.
After ending the call, Nora turned back to Dr. Weston. Thank you for your help interpreting these entries. Your insights have been invaluable. These women deserve justice, Dr. Weston said simply. Their faith remained unbroken, even in the darkest circumstances. The least we can do is ensure their story is told truthfully. As Dr. Weston gathered her notes, Sheriff Reeves entered the room, shaking snow from his coat. We've got officers headed to the garden grotto now, though they'll have to dig through the snow to find anything, he reported. And I checked on Gregory Turner. He was never reported missing, but there's an interesting note in the county records. He sold his house and most of his possessions in March 2003, just weeks after the sisters disappeared. The sale was handled by mail. No one saw him in person during the transactions. Donovan killed him, Nora concluded. just as Sister Lucia feared. "It's likely," Reeves agreed. "I've expanded the search warrant for Donovan's property in Arizona to include any evidence related to Turner's disappearance." Nora nodded, then hesitated. "There's something else troubling me. The journal makes it clear that Donovan acted with Bishop Kaplan's knowledge, at least regarding the embezzlement. But did Kaplan know what Donovan did to the sisters?" "We'll add that to our list of questions for the bishop," Reeves said grimly. "I've scheduled an interview with him this afternoon." As they prepared to leave for the interview, Nora's phone rang again. It was an officer at the convent site. "Detective Quinn, we found something buried beneath the Virgin Mary statue in the garden grotto. A waterproof document case containing financial records, bank statements, and photographs. And, Detective, there are pictures of Father Donovan and Bishop Kaplan at what appears to be a vacation property with several women. Definitely not church-related activities." "Bag everything carefully," Nora instructed. "We're on our way." The case that had haunted her for 6 years was finally breaking open, revealing corruption and evil beyond what even she had imagined. But one crucial piece remained missing: the whereabouts of Gregory Turner, the reluctant accomplice who had apparently paid with his life for his crisis of conscience. Bishop Thomas Kaplan's office in Helena exuded power and prestige. Located in a wing of the diocesan headquarters, the space featured dark wood paneling, an imposing desk, and windows overlooking carefully manicured grounds, now covered in snow. The bishop himself matched his surroundings. Tall, imperious, with silver hair and the practiced smile of a man accustomed to deference. That smile faltered slightly when Sheriff Reeves and Nora entered his office, their expressions serious and official. "Sheriff, Detective," Bishop Kaplan greeted them, remaining seated behind his desk. "I said your secretary, this concerns St. Veronica's Convent. I understood that property was sold years ago." "It was," Nora confirmed, taking a seat without waiting for an invitation. "But recent developments have brought it back to our attention." The bishop's eyes narrowed slightly. "What developments?" Sheriff Reeves placed a file folder on the desk between them. "The remains of the 5 missing sisters from St. Veronica's have been found, Bishop Kaplan. They were sealed behind a false wall in the convent, where they died of starvation and dehydration." For a moment, genuine shock seemed to register on his face. Then his features composed themselves into an expression of grave concern. "This is horrifying news. When were they discovered?" "Yesterday," Nora replied, watching him carefully. "And along with Sister Lucia's journal, documenting their final days." The bishop reached for the small cross that he wore around his neck, fingering it absently. "A terrible tragedy. Do you know who was responsible for this atrocity?" "That's why we're here," Sheriff Reeves said. "The journal explicitly names Father Victor Donovan as the person who imprisoned them. It also details the reason. The sisters had discovered financial irregularities involving both Father Donovan and yourself." Bishop Kaplan's face hardened. "That's absurd. I had nothing to do with whatever madness overtook Father Donovan. We've recovered the evidence Sister Verity hid in the garden grotto," Nora said, her voice level but firm. "Financial records documenting years of embezzlement, offshore accounts, falsified invoices, all bearing your signature alongside Father Donovan's. This is outrageous," the bishop said, rising from his chair. "I am a man of God, a servant of the church for nearly 50 years. These accusations are slanderous." "They're not accusations, they're facts," Nora countered, opening the file folder to reveal copies of the recovered documents. "These records show systematic theft of church funds spanning more than a decade. Funds marked for charity work, building maintenance, educational programs, all diverted to personal accounts." "Detective Quinn," the bishop said, his voice taking on a condescending tone, "church finances are complex. What appears irregular to outside eyes often has perfectly legitimate explanations within ecclesiastical accounting practices." "Does ecclesiastical accounting typically involve numbered accounts in the Cayman Islands?" Sheriff Reeves asked dryly. The bishop's face flushed. "I'm not answering any further questions without diocesan council present." "That's your right," Nora acknowledged, "but we're not leaving Helena without answers. 5 women died horrific deaths. Gregory Turner is presumed murdered, and you benefited financially from it all." For the first time, genuine fear flickered across the bishop's face. "Gregory Turner? What does he have to do with this?" "He helped Father Donovan construct the wall," Sheriff Reeves explained. "According to Sister Lucia's journal, he objected when he realized the sisters would be left to die. There was an altercation, a gunshot. Turner was never seen again." The bishop sank back into his chair, suddenly looking older. "This is a mistake. A terrible mistake." "The only mistake," Nora said coldly, "was assuming these crimes would remain buried forever." Before the bishop could respond, there was a knock at the door. A young priest entered, his expression anxious. "Forgive the interruption, Your Excellency, but you asked to be notified immediately about any matters concerning Father Donovan?"
"What is it, Father Raymond?" the bishop asked sharply. "I've just received word from the retirement community in Sedona. Father Donovan is gone. He checked out last night, leaving no forwarding address." Nora and Reeves exchanged alarmed glances. "When exactly did he leave?" Reeves demanded. The young priest looked startled by the intensity of the question. "According to the message, shortly after he received a visit from local police officers yesterday evening." "He's running," Nora said, already on her feet. "We need to issue an APB immediately." As Sheriff Reeves stepped outside to make the necessary calls, Father Raymond hesitated, then spoke again. "Detective, there's something else you should know. I work in the diocesan archives, and I've been troubled for some time about certain financial discrepancies. I've been gathering documentation." He glanced nervously at Bishop Kaplan. "Speak freely, Father," Nora encouraged him. "I've compiled records showing unusual payments from diocesan accounts to a construction company called Turner & Sons, dating from February and March 2003. The amounts were substantial, authorized jointly by Father Donovan and Bishop Kaplan, but I could never find any corresponding work performed." Bishop Kaplan surged to his feet. "Father Raymond, you are dismissed. This is insubordination." The young priest stood his ground. "With respect, Your Excellency, the truth must come to light." Nora turned to the bishop, whose face had gone ashen. "Those payments, they were to Gregory Turner for constructing the wall, weren't they? And later, perhaps, for his silence." The bishop remained silent, but his expression confirmed Nora's suspicions. "Father Raymond," Nora said, "we would greatly appreciate copies of those records." "I've already prepared them," the young priest said, producing a USB drive from his pocket. "Everything is here." Sheriff Reeves returned, his expression grim. "Donovan's credit cards were used to purchase a bus ticket to Seattle last night. Local authorities are checking security footage of the station." "I believe Turner is alive," Nora said, suddenly the pieces connecting in her mind.
The journal mentioned a gunshot, but not that Turner was killed. What if Donovan used that gunshot to intimidate Turner into silence? The payments Father Raymond discovered could have been hush money. But why didn't Turner ever come forward, Reeves asked. Fear, complicity, guilt, Nora suggested. Or perhaps something more sinister. Bishop Kaplan, do you know if Gregory Turner is alive? The bishop's composure finally cracked. I don't know. I genuinely don't know. Donovan handled that situation. He told me Turner had been taken care of and wouldn't be a problem. I assumed that meant financial arrangements, not murder. And the sisters, Nora pressed. Did you know what he did to them? The bishop's hands trembled slightly. Donovan told me he had arranged for them to be transferred to different convents, separated so they couldn't continue raising questions. I believed him. By the time I realized the sisters had never arrived at their supposed destinations, months had passed. Donovan insisted that they must have decided to leave their vocations entirely. And you never questioned that, Sheriff Reeves asked incredulously. I should have, the bishop admitted, his voice barely audible. God forgive me. I should have. Bishop Thomas Kaplan, Sheriff Reeves said formally, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, embezzlement of church funds, and as an accessory after the fact in the imprisonment and deaths of the Sisters of St. Veronica's Convent. As Reeves read him his rights, Nora turned to Father Raymond. We need to find Gregory Turner. Do those records contain any addresses, contact information, anything that might help us locate him? The young priest nodded. There's a P.O. box in Missoula where the payments were sent, and the last payment was made just 3 months ago. He's alive, Nora said with certainty, and he may be the key to finding Father Donovan before he disappears for good. Within hours, they had traced the P.O. box to a remote cabin near the Idaho border, registered under the name George Thompson. Satellite imagery showed a small structure, accessible only by a single dirt road that would be nearly impassable in the current snowstorm. We need to get there immediately, Nora insisted, studying maps of the area. If Turner is there, he could be in danger. Donovan might try to eliminate the last witness who could connect him directly to the sisters' deaths. As they assembled a team for the dangerous journey through the storm, Nora couldn't shake the feeling that they were racing against time, not just to capture a fleeing killer, but to save the life of the reluctant accomplice whose conscience might have finally caught up with him after 6 long years. The convoy of police vehicles struggled through nearly a foot of fresh snow. Their progress slowed to a crawl on an unmarked forest road. Nora sat in the lead SUV beside Sheriff Reeves, studying satellite images of their destination on her tablet. There, she pointed to a small clearing ahead. That should be Turner's cabin. The structure that emerged through the swirling snow was modest, a simple log cabin with a metal roof now blanketed in white. Smoke curled from the chimney, suggesting someone was inside. There was a single vehicle parked nearby, partially covered by snow. Approach with caution, Reeves instructed the tactical team over the radio. We don't know if Turner is alone or if Donovan might have reached him first. The officers took positions surrounding the cabin while Nora and Reeves approached the front door. With officers covering them, Reeves knocked firmly. Gregory Turner, this is Sheriff Reeves with the county police. We need to speak with you. Silence, followed only by the sound of wind through the pines.
Reeves knocked again, louder. Mr. Turner, if you're in there, please respond. This concerns Father Victor Donovan and the Sisters of St. Veronica's Convent. The curtain at the front window twitched slightly. Then a hoarse voice called out from inside. Are you alone? No, Reeves answered honestly. We have officers with us. We're here to ensure your safety, Mr. Turner. After another long pause, the sound of multiple locks being disengaged came from the door. It opened slowly to reveal a bearded man in his mid-50s, his face weathered and eyes wary. Gregory Turner? Nora asked. The man nodded once. Nobody's called me that in years. May we come in? Reeves requested. It's important. Turner hesitated, then stepped back, allowing entry. The cabin's interior was sparse but neat. A single room with a wood stove, small kitchen area, and simple furnishings. Books lined one wall, and a ham radio sat on a desk near the window. "You found them, didn't you?" Turner asked, without preamble, his voice rough with emotion. "The sisters?" Nora nodded. "Yesterday, construction crew broke through the wall you built." Turner flinched visibly at her words. "I never meant for them to die in there. You have to believe that." "Sister Lucia's journal suggests as much," Nora said, watching his reaction carefully. "She wrote that you argued with Father Donovan when you realized his intentions." Turner sank into a chair, passing a trembling hand over his face. "I thought we were just securing him temporarily. Donovan told me the bishop had ordered them transferred to different convents because they were causing trouble. Said we needed to keep them contained for a few hours until transportation arrived." His voice broke. "I didn't know. I swear to God I didn't know he planned to leave them there." "What happened after you built the wall?" Reeves asked. "When I realized no transportation was coming, I confronted him. Told him we needed to let him out. He had a gun. Said the sisters had discovered something that would destroy the church, that they fabricated financial evidence against him and the bishop." Turner's eyes clouded with the memory. "I didn't believe him, not entirely, but when I insisted on releasing them, he shot me." Turner pulled up his shirt to reveal a puckered scar on his abdomen. "Not fatal, obviously, but I was bleeding badly. He thought I was dying. Left me there on the convent floor while he went to take care of loose ends," he said. "How did you survive?" Nora asked. "I managed to drag myself outside, got to my truck somehow, drove until I passed out. A hunter found me on a forest road, got me to a hospital in Missoula. I gave a false name, said it was a hunting accident. I was terrified Donovan would finish the job if he knew I was alive." "Why didn't you come forward, tell someone what happened to the sisters?" Turner's face contorted with shame, fear, guilt. "I was part of it, wasn't I? I built that wall. And then the payments started coming. Monthly deposits to an account I'd never opened. A message that if I stayed quiet and disappeared, I'd be taken care of. If not," he shrugged helplessly. "I convinced myself they must have been released, that Donovan wouldn't actually leave them to die in there. I needed to believe that." Nora studied him, seeing the weight of 6 years of guilt etched into his features. "When did you realize they hadn't been released?" "About a year later. I risked contacting a friend in Blackwater Ridge. He told me the sisters had never been found, that everyone assumed they'd left voluntarily. That's when I knew. That's when I knew they were still in that room, behind that wall I built." "Why not come forward then?" Reeves demanded. "I was a coward," Turner admitted, his voice breaking. "I told myself it was too late, that they must already be dead, that coming forward would only put me in prison without helping them. The money kept coming, and I kept taking it, hating myself with each deposit." Nora leaned forward. "Gregory, we need to find Father Donovan. He fled his retirement community in Arizona yesterday, learning we'd discovered the sisters." Turner's head snapped up, sudden fear in his eyes. "He's coming here. He called me last night." "What?" Reeves was instantly alert. "When is he arriving?" "He didn't say exactly, just that he needed a place to lay low for a while. Said he'd be bringing cash, that we could both disappear somewhere new." Turner's hands clenched into fists. "I told him to come. I wanted to face him after all these years." Nora and Reeves exchanged glances. "This could be our opportunity to apprehend him," Reeves said quietly. Turning back to Turner, Nora asked,
Did he say how he was traveling? Driving. Said he'd rented a car under a different name. When did you expect him to arrive? Turner glanced at the clock on the wall. Today. Sometime this afternoon, depending on the weather. Reeves immediately stepped outside to alert the tactical team and position officers out of sight. Nora remained with Turner, who seemed to be struggling with the weight of his confessions. "Will I go to prison?" he asked finally. "That will be for the district attorney and courts to decide. Your cooperation now will certainly be considered, as will the fact that you were shot when you tried to help the sisters." Turner nodded slowly. "I deserve whatever comes. Haven't had a good night's sleep in 6 years." He looked up at Nora, his eyes haunted. "What was it like when you found them?" "They died together," Nora said gently, "in a circle, facing each other. Sister Lucia's journal suggests they spent their final days in prayer, finding peace despite their circumstances." Turner's eyes filled with tears. "And they knew that I tried to help them?" "Yes," Nora confirmed. "Sister Lucia wrote that they heard the argument, the gunshot. They feared you had been killed." Turner wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "Small comfort, I suppose." Sheriff Reeves returned, shaking snow from his coat. "We're set up. Officers concealed in position surrounding the cabin. If Donovan shows up, we'll take him." The wait that followed was tense. Turner made coffee, his movements mechanical, while Nora and Reeves maintained radio contact with the officers outside. The storm intensified, reducing visibility and creating an eerie silence, broken only by the occasional crackle of the wood stove. 2 hours passed before a radio call from an officer on the perimeter broke the stillness. Vehicle approaching, silver sedan, single occupant, proceeding slowly due to snow conditions. Reeves confirmed the tactical team was in position, then turned to Turner. "Act naturally. Let him come inside. We'll handle the rest." Turner nodded, his face pale but determined. He positioned himself in a chair facing the door, while Nora and Reeves concealed themselves in the cabin's small bedroom. The sound of a car engine grew closer, then fell silent. Footsteps crunched in the snow, followed by a sharp knock on the door. "Gregory, it's me. Open up." Turner took a deep breath, then moved to the door and opened it. Father Victor Donovan stood on the threshold, snow dusting his coat and gray hair. At 67, he remained tall and imposing, though his face showed the strain of recent events. He carried a leather suitcase in one hand. "Thank God," Donovan said, stepping inside and stamping snow from his boots. "This storm is getting worse by the minute. I wasn't sure I'd make it." "Didn't think you'd actually come," Turner said, his voice carefully neutral as he closed the door behind Donovan. "Didn't have much choice," Donovan replied, setting down his suitcase. "They found them, Gregory, after all these years." "The sisters?" Turner feigned surprise. Donovan nodded grimly. "Construction crew broke through the wall. Police are looking for both of us now." "Both of us," Turner echoed. "But you shot me, left me for dead. And yet here you are, taking my money all these years. That makes you complicit, Gregory, an accessory. Is that what you told yourself, that I was as guilty as you, that I deserved to live with this knowledge?" Donovan's expression darkened. "We do what we must to survive. I protected the church from scandal, protected the bishop, protected the faith of thousands who would have been disillusioned if the sisters' accusations had become public." "You murdered 5 innocent women." Turner's control finally broke. "You sealed them behind a wall and left them to die slowly, terrified and alone." "They chose their fate," Donovan said coldly. "I gave them the opportunity to remain silent, to accept transfers to different convents. They refused.
Their stubborn self-righteousness left me no choice." "There's always a choice," Sheriff Reeves said, stepping from the bedroom with his weapon drawn. "And you made the wrong one, Father Donovan." Donovan froze, his eyes darting between Reeves and Nora, who had emerged behind him. "A trap," he breathed. "Victor Donovan," Nora said formally, "you're under arrest for the murders of Sister Regina Phillips, Agnes Payton, Verity Michaels, Catherine Blackwood, and Sister Lucia Navarro. You have the right to remain silent." As Nora continued reading him his rights, Donovan's composure crumbled. The commanding presence that had intimidated parishioners for decades seemed to collapse inward, leaving an old man shaking with rage and fear. "You don't understand," he protested as officers entered to handcuff him. "The money was for the greater good. The Father and I had plans, charitable initiatives that would have helped thousands. The sisters were going to ruin everything with their narrow-minded moralism." "Charitable initiatives?" Nora repeated incredulously. "We've seen the bank records, Father, the vacation properties, the luxury expenditures. Don't insult us with lies about charity." As the officers led Donovan outside to a waiting vehicle, Turner remained seated, his expression a mixture of relief and continued guilt. "It's over," Nora told him gently. "After 6 years, it's finally over." Turner shook his head slowly. "Not for them. Not for the sisters." "No," Nora agreed soberly. "But perhaps now they can rest in peace, knowing the truth has finally come to light." As they prepared to leave the cabin, Turner asked one final question. "The journal you mentioned, Sister Lucia's, did she write anything about forgiveness?" Nora remembered the final entry, the one that had moved even the hardened Dr. Weston to tears. "She wrote that they forgave Father Donovan, though they prayed for justice. And now, at last, they have both."
The Blackwater Ridge Courthouse had never seen such crowds. On a cold April morning, 3 months after the discovery of the sisters' remains, every seat was filled for the sentencing of Father Victor Donovan and Bishop Thomas Kaplan. Outside, news vans lined the street, while reporters delivered updates to a national audience that had become captivated by the story of the 5 murdered nuns. Nora sat in the front row beside Chief Barnes, watching as Donovan and Kaplan were led into the courtroom in handcuffs and prison jumpsuits. Both men had pleaded guilty to avoid trials, Donovan to 5 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of attempted murder, Kaplan to embezzlement and being an accessory after the fact. Judge Eleanor Winters, a stern woman in her 60s, surveyed the courtroom with a grave expression before addressing the defendants. "Father Victor Donovan, Bishop Thomas Kaplan, you stand before this court having admitted to crimes of extraordinary cruelty and betrayal. As men who took vows to serve God and their community, you instead abused your positions of trust for personal gain. When confronted with your wrongdoing, you responded not with repentance, but with violence and deception." Judge Winters paused, her gaze shifting to Donovan specifically. "Father Donovan, your actions in sealing 5 innocent women behind a wall to die slowly of thirst and starvation represents depravity of the highest order. That you continued to minister to your congregation while knowing what you had done compounds your sin in both earthly and, one must presume, heavenly courts." Turning to Kaplan, she continued, "Bishop Kaplan, while you claim ignorance of Father Donovan's most heinous actions, your willful blindness and continued participation in the cover-up makes you morally complicit in their deaths. Your priority was protecting yourself and your ill-gotten gains, not seeking justice for 5 women who had dedicated their lives to the church you claimed to serve." The sentencing proceeded swiftly.
Donovan received 5 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole, plus 20 years for the attempted murder of Gregory Turner. Kaplan received 15 years for his role in the crimes and the embezzlement scheme. As the defendants were led away, Nora felt a complex mixture of emotions: satisfaction that justice had finally been served, sorrow for the sisters' suffering, and a lingering sense that no punishment could truly atone for what had been done to them. Outside the courthouse, she found herself facing a group of reporters eager for statements from the detective who had never given up on the case. She declined most questions, but did offer a brief comment. Today is not about the perpetrators of this crime, but about the victims, Sisters Regina, Agnes, Verity, Catherine, and Lucia. They lived lives of service and devotion, and they died with dignity and faith even in the darkest circumstances. Justice has been served, but our focus should remain on honoring their memory. In the days that followed, Blackwater Ridge began the difficult process of healing. Father Callahan led a special mass honoring the sisters, attended by nearly the entire community. The diocese, now under new leadership committed to transparency, established a foundation in the sisters' names to support charitable causes throughout the region. Gregory Turner had received a plea deal in exchange for his testimony, 5 years probation and community service, in recognition of his attempt to help the sisters and the near-fatal injury he had suffered as a result. He now worked with a church-based restorative justice program, speaking to offenders about the consequences of moral compromise. 2 weeks after the sentencing, on a clear spring morning, Nora attended the sisters' funeral and reburial at Sacred Heart Cemetery. Their remains, carefully recovered from the hidden chamber, had been placed in simple but dignified caskets, each adorned with a single white rose. Father Callahan presided over the ceremony, his words thoughtful and healing. These sisters did not lose their faith, even in their darkest hour. Their final act was one of forgiveness, a testament to the depth of their spiritual commitment. While we mourn the cruelty of their deaths, we celebrate the strength of their lives and the example they set for all of us. After the ceremony, Nora lingered by the freshly covered graves. A permanent memorial was planned, a stone angel with 5 stars at its base, one for each sister. The diocese had also announced that St. Veronica's Convent would not be converted to luxury apartments after all. Instead, the building would be restored and transformed into a retreat center for spiritual healing and reconciliation. Father Callahan approached as Nora stood in quiet contemplation. "Detective Quinn," he greeted her softly, "I wanted to thank you personally for your perseverance in finding the truth. Many would have given up years ago." "I couldn't let them be forgotten," Nora replied simply. "Faith takes many forms. Sometimes it means believing in what cannot be seen. Other times it means refusing to accept what others tell you must be true." Nora nodded, understanding his meaning. "I never believed they left voluntarily. It never made sense." The diocese has decided that Sister Lucia's journal should be published, with appropriate editing for privacy. Her words have already provided comfort to many who struggle with their faith in difficult circumstances. "She would have wanted that," Nora said, remembering the final entries where Lucia had expressed fear not of death but of being forgotten. She wanted their story told. As the priest departed to attend to other mourners, Nora remained by the graves, thinking of the case that had defined her career and changed her perspective on so many things: justice, faith, perseverance, and the human capacity for both terrible cruelty and remarkable grace. The truth had finally emerged from behind the wall that had concealed it for 6 long years. And while justice could never truly compensate for the sisters' suffering, Nora took comfort in knowing they had been found, remembered, and honored at last.
1 year later, on a bright February morning,
Nora Quinn walked the peaceful paths of Sacred Heart Cemetery. The snow had melted early this year, allowing crocuses to peek through the softened earth, small purple and white harbingers of spring. She carried 5 white roses, one for each of the sisters whose story had touched so many lives. The memorial stone was in place now, a beautiful angel with arms outstretched, 5 stars carved into its base, illuminated by the morning sun. In the years since the sisters' remains had been found, much had changed in Blackwater Ridge. The community had grappled with difficult questions about trust, faith, and institutional responsibility. The scandal had forced a reckoning within the church hierarchy, leading to greater financial transparency and accountability throughout the diocese. St. Veronica's Convent had been carefully restored, the false wall removed, and the hidden chamber transformed into a small chapel dedicated to the sisters' memory. The retreat center now welcomed people of all faiths seeking healing and peace. Nora placed the roses one by one before the memorial, then stood in silence, remembering. Sister Lucia's journal had indeed been published, becoming an unexpected source of inspiration for readers across the country. Her unwavering faith in the face of unimaginable circumstances had resonated with many struggling through their own dark times. One passage in particular had touched Nora deeply. Even here, in this place of darkness, we find moments of light. Sister Catherine saw a spider building its web in the corner near our small window to the world. See, even the smallest creatures continue their work regardless of circumstances. We laughed then, our first laughter in many days, at the thought of this tiny spider teaching us resilience. Perhaps God speaks to us through the simplest things when we can no longer hear the grand sermons. Nora had visited the cemetery every month since the funeral, a quiet ritual of remembrance. Today she wasn't alone. As she stood before the memorial, she heard footsteps approaching on the graveled path. Gregory Turner nodded respectfully as he joined her. He looked healthier than she had last seen him, the haunted expression in his eyes somewhat diminished. "Detective Quinn, I thought I might find you here today." "The anniversary," Nora acknowledged. "Hard to believe it's been a year already." Turner nodded, placing his own small bouquet beside Nora's roses. "I come here often, try to make peace with what happened. Some days are easier than others." "How is your work with the restorative justice program?" Nora asked. "Challenging, rewarding." Turner smiled faintly. "Helping others face their mistakes makes facing my own a little easier." They stood in companionable silence for a moment before Turner spoke again. "I read Sister Lucia's journal when it was published. The section about me, about how they heard the gunshot and feared I'd been killed, how they prayed for me." His voice thickened. "I didn't deserve their prayers. Yet they gave them freely," Nora said gently. "That was who they were." Turner nodded, visibly moved. "The last page, her final entry where she writes about forgiveness, that's why I wanted to find you today, to tell you what it meant to me." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small carved wooden cross. "I made this. Thought it might belong here with them." Nora watched as he carefully placed the cross at the base of the memorial. The craftsmanship was exquisite, each detail lovingly rendered by hands seeking atonement through creation. "It's beautiful," she said sincerely. "They would have appreciated it." As Turner stepped back, another figure approached, Father Callahan, carrying a small leather-bound book. "I hope I'm not intruding," he said, nodding to them both. "I wanted to share something with you, Detective Quinn. The diocese has been organizing Mother Superior Regina's personal papers, and we found this." He held out the book. "It's her private devotional journal from the year before the tragedy. There's an entry I thought you should see." Nora accepted the book, opening it to where Father Callahan had placed a marker. Mother Superior Regina's handwriting was elegant and flowing, unlike Sister Lucia's cramped script. October 15th, 2002. Today, young Detective Quinn visited, asking for donations for the children's shelter. She reminds me so much of her Aunt Beatrice, the same determination, the same clear-eyed view of right and wrong. In a world of increasing moral ambiguity, such clarity is refreshing. I see in her the same quality I value in our youngest sister, Lucia, an unwillingness to look away from truth, no matter how uncomfortable. Such people are God's instruments of justice in a world that prefers comfortable lies to difficult honesty. Nora felt a surge of emotion as she read the words. She had visited the convent several times in her early days as a detective, but had no idea Mother Superior Regina had taken such notice of her. "She saw something in you," Father Callahan said quietly, "something that eventually led to justice for her and her sisters." "I was just doing my job," Nora demurred. "With extraordinary persistence," Father Callahan countered. "Most would have accepted the official explanation years ago." As they stood together before the memorial, the morning sun strengthened, illuminating the angel's face with golden light. In that moment, Nora felt a profound sense of completion, not just of a case, but of a promise kept to women who had remained faithful to truth even when it cost them everything.
The Sisters of St. Veronica's had vanished from sight for 6 long years, hidden behind a wall of lies and corruption. But they had never truly disappeared. Their story, their sacrifice, in their unwavering faith, had emerged from darkness into light, touching countless lives, with a testament to the enduring power of truth and the indomitable nature of the human spirit. In their final days, sealed away from the world they had served so faithfully, the sisters had found the strength to forgive those who had condemned them. And in doing so, they had left behind their most powerful lesson, that even in our darkest moments, light can still be found if we have eyes to see it.